Right, hello there. I'm going to attempt in one take to make a video which I gather is going to be played at my favourite school in the world, which is British School Manila. So hello, it's lovely to have the opportunity to talk to you. I'm just sorry it's not face to face, I'm sorry it's not live. But Mr. Gain, and hello Mr. Gain, has very kindly sent me some of your questions. I'm going to do my level best to answer them as honestly as I can. We'll do our best. There's a question from Josh, first of all. Josh, you're asking me if it's based on a true story, and that's an easy one to answer. Absolutely not. No, it's entire fantasy. Not fantasy as in wizards and whatnot, but it's completely from the imagination, based on a visit that I made some years ago out to Tondo. And if you go there yourself, if you watch the videos, you will see the trash trucks, the big blue lorries coming in every few minutes, and all the people, children in particular, gathering round them, waiting for the trash to unload, as if there are precious things, as if treasure is about to fall from the back of the lorry. So it was a very elementary thought: what might fall from the back of a lorry and change somebody's life? And I still remember asking I was a year 7 tutor, so I asked my year 7s for some ideas. This was at BSM, and of course they were reading you know who. They were reading Harry Potter, so they were suggesting that maybe Raphael could find an invisibility cloak or a baby unicorn or something as strange as that. And I thought, no, it's got to be real. It's got to be it can't be that kind of magic. So I came up with the idea of the wallet, and one thing led to another. Emma, you're asking me if somebody in BSM inspired me to write the book. Not really. I guess I do often think very fondly of the school's former head teacher, Mr. Chris Mance, who was very energetic in making and ensuring all us teachers visited the Tondo dump site. So I often think with great affection and respect of Mr. Mance, and how his inspiration was very infectious. Leah, what inspired you to write the story? Well, I've kind of begun to go through that already in talking about visiting the dump site. Travels really inspired me. Wherever I go, places like the Philippines, developing nations as it were, as a Westerner, you're very, very aware, shall we say, of more aware than you are in your own country of the levels of poverty. Those who have so much, those who have so little. And when you are at times literally tripping over children sleeping on the pavement, you can't help but think, what if, what could change things? When you hear stories of corruption, when you're aware of vast sums of money being simply thieved by those in power, by those whose responsibility it is or should be to share it, that's when stories come boiling. You know, I'm no politician, I'm no journalist, so an outlet for my rage is to compose tales like the one you've been reading. Andre, a very specific question here. Was there any reason for the names of any of the characters? I can't really recall. Raphael I chose because it's the name of an angel, and I've always been very fond of that name. Gardo because it seemed such a contrast, and that was important. Once I'd been writing Raphael for a little while, I really wanted a boy, a character, who would just be very, very different, and you can do that through names. Rat, well, rat came from a very specific place where I met a child who did live among rats, and that therefore seemed very logical. Let's go on. Annika, who is your favourite character in Trash? My favourite character is the one that I just mentioned, undoubtedly Rat. He's based on a little boy in Manila. He doesn't live there anymore, but I met him by chance one evening when I was having a beer in that part of the city known as Malate. And Malate is a very busy, heaving place, particularly at night. And I was having a drink there one night, and this child appeared next to me. I thought he was a little girl at first. He was very thin, very long shoulder-length hair, and he was simply walking the streets, hoping to find people who would use him, who would send him off on errands. He would go and fetch you a cigarette. He would go, and if you were hungry, he'd go and find you a pizza or something, and obviously you'd give him money for his services. And he was a very endearing child. He was very talkative. He spoke English fluently, and he was very, very friendly. So of course I asked him to get me some crisps or something, and tipped him, gave him quite a nice gift to say thank you, which welded us together every time I went to Malate. And I used to go there probably once, twice a week. This boy, his real name was Nico. Nico would appear, always wanting to help, assist. Could he get me popcorn, whatever. And one particular evening he said, you know, I'd love you to meet my family. Why don't you come and meet my mum? And I was just beginning to think about Trash. I was just plotting it in my head. So I thought, well, okay, it'll be interesting just seeing where a child like this lives. And honestly, that boy, Nico, he became the soul, the absolute beating heart of the book, because he took me to his home, which was a box amongst boxes piled up, stacked up. It was like a house of cards, and he and his family were squeezed into something, I don't know, it was the size of a packing case. And I was there at night where the rats were running all around the place. Nico and his mum and his brother, they just didn't notice them anymore, they didn't hear them. And they'd made me a pot of tea, and we were eating fruit, and we were talking and talking, and this is a long, long story, I'm afraid. I'll try and shorten it a little bit, but the point was, Nico had invited me for a reason. It wasn't just because he thought I was an interesting conversationalist. He knew that if he played his cards right, he might be able to make serious money if he handled me correctly. What he wanted, what he claimed to want, was money so that he could go home. He and his family, they didn't like Manila. The big city was too dangerous, just too heavy for them, so they wanted to get out and go back to the island that they'd once lived on, that he lived on as a very young child. And I was scratching my head. I was thinking, right, so Nico, you want the money for the ferry boat, do you? Well, I was like, yeah, I think I might be kind enough. I might just be able to afford that. So I must have offered him a little bit of money, and he'd looked at me like I was mad, and he said, no, Sir Andy, we don't want the fares to get back to the island. We've got that money already. And he crawled to the back of his little house, and in the brickwork he removed a brick and took out a little metal box and opened it up. And it was a metal box so that the rats wouldn't nibble and gnaw at what was inside, and it was a wallet inside with money And that was Nico's savings. They'd saved enough money, and he took out all these banknotes and showed them to me. So I said, well, in that case, Nico, why don't you just go home? You know, you don't need my help. Oh no, Sir Andy, no, we do. We need work. We can't live on sand. We can't eat the sunshine. All these lines, you may be recognising some of the images. So many of these lines, they ended up in trash, in rats' mouth. I said, well, what do you need then? He said, a boat. Buy me a fishing boat. I said, can you fish? Can I fish? I could fish. I could fish before I could walk. I could swim before I could walk. All these beautiful lines. Please, Sir Andy, help us. If I could be a fisherman, I'd be truly happy. And I was so moved by the concept, the idea that this 12-year-old just wanted to get back to Paradise Island so he could be a fisher boy and a fisherman. And it's got a religious dimension to it as well. All those, you know, Christian images of fishermen throwing your nets and so on. And the classic idea, you know, you don't buy somebody a fish, you buy them a fishing rod so that they can have a chance of being self-reliant. So that the idea was so moving, it ended up threading its way into the very, very soul of the book that I was writing. Long story, but that's true. Without Nico, there would be no novel. I could tell you so much about him. Anyway, must move on. How long did it take me to write Trash? Well, I'm embarrassed to say that it didn't take me long at all. I wrote it ever so quickly. The thing I'm working on at the moment, oh Lord, it's taking forever. But Trash came out like an egg. It just popped out, fully formed. I think it took me just short of a fortnight, 10 or 11 days, and I had the first draft. 65,000 words, I think, and very few of them changed. Sometimes you just get lucky. You're in the right place, the right time, you don't have distractions, and a story comes. You probably know yourselves. You know when something's working. When you're doing your homework, if it's a struggle, if you're hating it, if you're not in the mood, it's so hard. The next night or the next morning, suddenly the weather's changed, you're in the mood, you've slept well, and it comes more easily, and perhaps there's a little bit of inspiration there, and the work takes off. Will there be a part 2? Well, I'm sure by now you've read what the boys themselves feel about that. No, there won't be, I'm afraid. I did genuinely try, but it's a bit like what I was saying a moment ago. If things don't come naturally, I'm not saying that you shouldn't work hard and try and push something on, but if something really isn't happening, isn't coming naturally, I think it is best to abandon it. So I was wise to abandon part 2. Do the boys stay fishing all their lives? I could tell you about Nico. Once the book was written, I did realise that I had a terrible debt to pay, and the suspicious part of me, you see, I'm a suspicious person, and I thought that Nico was probably telling me lies, that he was smart enough to be inventing this desire to get back to his mythical island as a way of parting me from my hard-earned money. So I didn't really believe him. But once the book was written, I thought, you know, I couldn't sleep. I thought, you've got to go and check. So we talked again, and I said, well, look, why don't you go to your island and I'll visit you there. And I was thinking, smart move, Andy. You're going to get a holiday out of this, and you're going to find out whether Nico is telling the truth. So I flew out to Nico's island. He got the ferry, which takes about 3 days. I got the plane, and there he was waiting for me, and he had one big question on his mind: when are you going to give me the money for my fishing boat? So I felt at that stage that I didn't really have a choice, and he bought himself and his family the most beautiful, beautiful banker, and I went off to I went off home, and I used to get these texts from him, wonderful texts about what he was doing and the fish that he was catching and so on. And then one particular day, Andy, I need to see you, I've got a problem. Can we meet? I'm coming back to Manila. So he came all the way back to Manila, and it turned out that, oh, there were engine problems, the engine wasn't big enough, he needed a new engine, so we had to sort all that out. And I just mention it really because the book ends on that happy ending, and I'm very proud of that. The book needs a happy ending, and those boys need victory. But in real life, you know, one always runs straight into complications, and Nico certainly has run into a few, but he's still fishing as far as I know. I hope to see him later this year, or maybe next. What happened to Olivia Weston? I don't know. She went home. She realised that she wasn't cut out to be a hero, and got on with her life. I expect she's at college. What happens to Senator Zapanta? I better not say too much about that. I don't want to get involved in local politics. I'm not qualified. I imagine he's looking after himself. That's what his principal skill is, after all. What am I currently writing? How much to say about that? I sent the class, a little snippet of what I'm working on. It's another story based in the Philippines, and if it ever gets finished and gets published, it will be the second book that I'll have set there. It's about a girl. She could be a British school Manila girl. She's in year 8. I've called her Max, and Max is one of those children who, for various reasons, has to be very careful about avoiding situations where she might get kidnapped. She comes from a family where that is a real fear, and of course it's a book. You need a plot line, you need jeopardy, fear. So very early on in the novel, I think on about page 5, that awful, terrifying thing happens. She gets kidnapped and is hidden away by people who clearly want access to the family wealth, and that's what I'm working on. It's written, it's finished, I know exactly what's happening, but there are certain details every time I read them through, I just can't get it right. There are lumps and bumps that I've got to iron out. So it won't be going to my agent. It's been to my agent once, and she's sent it back with comments and suggestions. It's just like having your work marked. It's just like having it. You look at your book and you think, oh my goodness, have I got to do it again? Do you want another draft? But it does need. It really does need reworking. So yeah, that's what I'm working on at the moment, alongside various other little projects. I won't get complicated. What advice would you give to budding young writers? There's not much advice you can give, and the advice I give people never actually want to hear. People want clever, fancy, technical advice. Oh, use some adverbial clauses and make sure your metaphor is an extended one. Ensure that all that nonsense. There's only one piece of advice you can give, which is get on with it. Stop wasting time. Stop sharpening your pencil. Just sit down and start writing. And when you get tired, have a cup of tea and do another hour and stick at it. And then, and this is an even nastier piece of advice, then you've got to show it to somebody who's going to criticise it. If you show it to your mum, she'll probably say, darling, you're a genius, this is wonderful, you're so clever. And that's not real. I mean, it's what you want to hear, but it's not going to make the work better. What you need is some honest criticism. You need to show it to someone who can say, you think this is funny? I'm not laughing. You think this is interesting? Sorry, this goes on way too long. Cut it there, rewrite it. Oh, I don't believe that. That would never happen. Change that. You need somebody that's really going to take out a sharp knife and start slashing it to pieces. I can only say that because that's what my agent and my publisher does to me. I don't like it when it happens, but it does make for a better book, a better story. And that's true of everything, isn't it? Whether it's maths homework, whether it's languages, whether you're playing football or basketball, you need a trainer. You need somebody who's going to risk upsetting you and say, come on, you can do better than that. Well, I hope I haven't interrupted your break. I hope you haven't sailed through lunchtime or anything like that. I'm trying with great difficulty to imagine you all in the British School Manila classrooms. As I say, my favourite school in the world. So thank you so much for reading my book. Thank you for your very, very interesting questions. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Goodbye.